Hello everybody, thanks for joining us today. And today with us we have Bob Koester. And Bob's business is Bob Koester Business Financial Services. So Bob does consulting businesses, helping them be more successful from a financial standpoint.
Right.
At times he's also a court-appointed receiver.
Correct.
And handles real estate and other different types of assets. So we're going to get a little more of the inside look at how Bob does his magic.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Sure, let's go.
So Bob, you cash flow improvement for companies, kind of one of your two main channels you go down through. Would you explain for everybody kind of what an NOI rather than a traditional approach is and how you do that?
Sure. I make the assumption that non-cash accounts don't really pay for anything. So what I call the NOI approach is to get to what is the actual cash net operating income of the company, and then compare that or use that to calculate what appropriate expense areas are and expense amounts are, particularly in the three areas that I call essential, discretionary, and we'll get it if we can kinds of expenses. So
wants versus needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And let's just, as an example, jump down to the receivership section for a minute. If I get involved in a custodial kind of a case for a client or for a lender, the best way to illustrate that is people get paid first, essential expenses get paid second, and everything else gets paid third. So that's kind of how that all drives itself.
Right.
And so the part of the analysis is getting in and figuring out which of the expenses on the P&L really are essential, which are really discretionary, and which can probably be saved or put off to greener pastures.
You explain how when you first show up at a business, what you do before you even go in. Would you kind of tell them that?
Oh yeah, sure. That's
funny.
Usually what I try to do is when I go out to a client for the first time, I'll go out the day before and drive around the parking lot and see if I can figure out where the executive parking is. And when I find that, I see what's parked in the executive parking spaces, and that pretty much can tell me whether it's going to be a successful venture or not. I found over the years that a lot of business people are in business for one of two reasons. They either really love what they do and want to make a business and a successful business out of it, or they're in business to finance a lifestyle.
Right.
And if they're in business to finance a lifestyle, they probably don't want to see me in the first place, and I probably can't help them.
Right.
So going through the parking lot and seeing what's parked in said parking lot gives a real clear indication as to what that decision process is.
Yeah, I can imagine if the court's appointed you to go into a business to see if you can save it or not, and you're driving up and they've got a Lamborghini, that may not be a good start.
It's not a good start. And actually, Bruce, I've since added to that description. If I go to a factory area like down in the West Bottoms or something, and I see a brand new metal building in the parking lot, I can almost guarantee that during business hours, there's an expensive car parked in there.
Or both.
Or both, yeah.
Not that there's anything against boats. We have boats too, but yeah, I got you. If they're in trouble already, they don't add to it.
Yeah, it's not a value judgment, it's just an economic judgment.
So back on the, looking at actual cash costs of operating the business, I mean, what are some common mistakes you see or things you kind of, red flags you come across?
One thing that I've seen over the years is businesses either buying equipment or staffing up without realizing exactly what that means in the long term. Okay, so for example, if you see an opportunity to build a new product line or enhance a product line, you might be tempted to buy machinery, lease machinery, add people.
Right.
And a lot of times the business people do that, and they don't foresee that at some point they're going to have to continue to pay for those acquisitions without perhaps really needing them.
Right. Getting over their skis a little bit too much. Maybe they can get something used, they can lease something, or do a little bit of a trial market analysis and see if it's going to work before they actually do the full hard investment into it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't, putting people on is a big deal. I mean, you're
Right.
creating a response, a commitment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a responsibility to those people, and most people that are scrupulous can't just say to somebody at the end of 90 days, well, the product didn't work, we'll see you later.
Right. Yeah, they got to figure out another way to use that person if possible. Or,
Right. And a lot of times the cost of adding production, other than the physical machinery or the physical people,
mm-hmm.
aren't clearly enough assessed on the front end.
Right.
What do the additional lights cost? What does the additional heating and air conditioning cost?
Mm-hmm.
What are the additional phone services or anything like that cost?
Yeah, the second and third waves, kind of like the government. They make a decision, it sounds great, but they don't look at the second and third and fourth wave of the implications if it doesn't go the right way.
And another big area that can easily be overlooked is how fast this new product is going to get knocked off.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the author's name, but a number of years ago there was a really, really funny book written by a guy that went by the stage name of Dr. Fad. And I don't know if you remember or not, but there was a thing called
Bill-bottom jeans and whatever.
Well,
right?
pretty much, yeah. There was a thing called the Wacky Wall Walker.
Okay.
It was like a sponge with tentacles. And you threw this thing against the wall, and it would walk down the wall in all sorts of unpredictable ways. And he sold them, out of them.
Right.
But like everything else, it got knocked off.
Yeah.
And
it's got a short cycle.
Yeah. The takeaway lesson in the book is it's not whether you'll get knocked off, it's when you'll get knocked off. It's kind of like falling off a motorcycle. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And so you think some people think they have a really, really unique individual idea, and they gear up and they completely slam through this production cycle to get on this thing, only to find out that 6 months later, their piece of the market for it
mm-hmm.
has gone away.
Yeah, and they needed at least a year or 2 year ramp time to really get a return on the investment out of it, or whatever the case is. They don't look at the overall market analysis.
Right.
And we see that a lot.
Yeah. And then I guess that kind of leads right into another area, which is looking at the receivables analysis
mm-hmm.
as part of this overall discovery process. One thing that I've seen over the years so many times are potentially fatal concentrations. I don't know how to emphasize that enough. Whatever your industry is, there's a saturation level above which you shouldn't have business going in all that one direction.
Right.
I remember years ago, I knew a guy that was in the printing business, and he had a nice diversified company, and he looked to increase the amount of business that he had with one very, very large customer.
Okay.
And over time, it got bigger and bigger. It went from 7% of his totals to 9
mm-hmm.
to 14, so on and so forth. It got up over 20, and this really large customer said, well, we'd really like you to order this special paper for our product. So he orders this special paper for that product. A little while later, they said, that purple ink that you use is really pretty.
It's just a half a shade
but
off.
It's just not quite right, Can you get this color purple?
Right.
So the guy goes out and he gets, 800 gallons of that colored purple. And all of a sudden, he wakes up one day, and this customer that he had been so enamored of and so interested in increasing his volume with was 90% of his business,
mm-hmm.
and they pulled the plug.
Oh my God. Ruined him right there.
Ruined him right on the spot, because he had nothing else left. Normally, I don't like to see a company having more than, depending on the industry, somewhere between a 10 and 15% concentration in any one account.
Right, yeah.
And it starts getting over that, you really start to have to ask questions. And particularly if those excessive concentrations are in what's called a contra asset account.
Mm.
By that I mean, for example, let's suppose that you're selling merchandise to your brother-in-law and you're buying raw materials from your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay. If either side of that equation has a family disruption,
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. There's a pretty good likelihood that either a payable won't get paid or a receivable won't get collected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that all becomes part of the analysis of kind of getting to what's really going on in the financials. And to take that a step further, it just astonishes me the number of business managers and owners that don't really understand their financials at all.
The importance of credit and collections policies and procedures. Is there anything specific you want to touch on that a little bit further?
When I say policies and procedures, that's dealing more with the mechanism for trying to get either not allow those accounts to start migrating across the aging,
right,
or when to be active and when to be really aggressive about getting involved with it and getting it collected. I've seen over the years that most people are way more attentive to their payables than they are to their receivables.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they'll pay their payables,
Mm-hmm.
but the collection effort on the receivable side, and specifically, I'm going to say 9.5 times out of 10, people will take a past due account that's out 60 or something like that, and they'll write them a letter.
Mm-hmm.
Least effective way in the world to collect
give them a call.
Give them a call. If they don't respond to the call, get in your car and go out there.
On cash and cash cycle, you know, we want to talk about burn rate and your approach to accounts payable and cash to debt ratios. Anything in particular there you want to red flag or point out?
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, you have to. It's important as a manager to calculate how much money you have and how you're going to use it and when you're going to run out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by burn rate.
Yeah.
If you've got a 40-day need and you got 30 days money,
mm-hmm.
you've got a negative burn rate.
Right.
And
you better take care of it sooner than later.
Yeah, particularly if your receivables are spread out all over the map and they're all old.
Right.
You know, because you're not going to be able to go in and turn that ship around overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And start collecting those receivables and getting those people to perform like they're supposed to.
Right.
But you are going to run out of money.
Yep.
And that's part also with the payables. Yeah, everybody's entitled to get paid according to terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you have to look at that and you have to understand what absolutely has to be paid and when it has to be paid.
Right. Yeah, because if you get some cash flow problems, you may be able to push something out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like I said, you can't have electricity get cut off.
No. And when we get down to receiverships, I'll tell you a great story about something very much like that.
Okay.
You have to understand what's going on with your money.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's maybe the point of the whole thing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the cash to debt ratio is simply how much cash covers the debt.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, the investment community has started using something called the cash to debt ratio.
Right.
And what they look at there are the recurring cash flows and how capable they are of servicing whatever the level of debt the company has. And that's a real meaningful number.
Right.
It's a real meaningful number because the lender can come and repossess the bulldozer.
Mm-hmm.
And they will.
Yeah.
Maybe not want to, but they will. So you have to stay on top of that as well. That's what that all means.
Absolutely, absolutely. So getting into the receiverships, and you've had some great stories over the years with being court appointed and testifying and so on and so forth. But would you describe kind of how a court appointed situation comes to be?
Sure. Typically, what happens is a commercial borrower can't pay their debt or won't pay their debt, and they exhaust all of the avenues that they can go down with the lender.
Mm-hmm.
The lender returns the case over to their attorney to collect. The attorney does whatever it is they do to try and effect collection.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to the point where it just isn't going anywhere fast.
Right.
And so the lender will say, okay, we agree that we need to ask the court to appoint a receiver to manage this company.
Mm-hmm.
So the attorney for the creditor will draw up an order appointing receiver. Go in, there'll be a hearing. Typically, in most of the jurisdictions around here, the judges are pretty good about accepting those and signing those orders if they're if they're well written.
Sure.
And then at that point, when that order is entered, then the company is in a receivership. I did one probably 5-7 years ago, a little manufacturing company, and one of the line items in the order was something called a receiver's certificate.
Okay.
And what that was that it provided for the lender to advance money for certain operating expenses
Mhm.
that formed a priority lien that was then to be repaid from
First.
the proceeds of the sale of the manufactured product.
Okay.
The one time that we did it, it worked like a charm.
Right.
It worked beautifully.
So they kept the business flowing, but
Right.
the lender had a senior position on first monies.
Right.
Yeah.
Third priority of payment.
Okay.
As it came in,
Mm-hmm.
if that receiver's certificate had been the means by which the payable had been paid.
Okay.
Okay. So in other words, this guy made specialty trucks.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had to go out and buy 15 seats, we could go in and take a receiver certificate, pay the supplier for those seats,
Okay.
pay the payroll for those seats to be installed in the truck,
Mm-hmm.
and then when the truck was sold and the money was collected for the sale,
Mhm.
then that certificate had a priority attached
The
to whatever.
seed company got paid first.
Well, the seat company got paid, sure. We
Yeah.
paid them first to get the seats.
Right.
But when we sold the truck, then the proceeds of sale of the truck went first to pay the receiver certificate advance
Okay.
before it could be applied to any other debt or anything else. And it worked great.
Yeah. To kind of put a bow on it, how do you go about meeting with somebody that reaches out to you, the first meeting? How does that go? What can you do for them to kind of see if it's a good fit for you to help them out with their business, hopefully save their business or improve their business? Doesn't have to be anybody in trouble. It could be just someone that wants to do better. But,
Right. What I've done since the very beginning of this business, I will do an hour initial consultation for absolutely no charge.
Mhm.
At the end of that, if it's likely that the relationship is going to work going forward, then I'll put a proposal together.
Very good. Bob, any last thoughts?
No, it's been fun.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you came in today. Appreciate it.
Sure.
We're trying to make sure we got good content out there for any folks that need help. As Independent Business Edge, of course, we have good quality folks like yourself and in pretty much any discipline that businesses may need some help in.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.